God, something about this recording just makes me think that it's going to be terrible. Hello there, and welcome to the Camo Net Podcast, episode 9 here. I'm your host, Bambi Sandy, with a group called Camo Net Supremacy, and we cover Arma Reforger and the competitive community for the game, though we'll be expanding to other games in the genre, such as Hell Let Loose and Squad at some point, if I can swallow my pride to go back to Squad in some fashion. Just a little bit of a disclaimer, real quick, before people skip past this session or section. Uh, this is a unique, kind of slightly longer starter chunk this time. Please don't skip past it. It's got important information. Uh, if you represent a team in the competitive community, or you believe that you'd be a good candidate for an interview, you can join our Discord through the link in the description and reach out that way. The link in the description is not a simple click on it and you join link. You gotta copy and paste it into your Discord join servers section. YouTube requires a certain account age before they let you embed links in your descriptions. So that's kind of our way around that right now. We've been told that we aren't allowed to reach out to teams participating in ARCL Season 2 for research, which would certainly include stuff like polling and demographics building. We're also going to assume that reaching out for team interviews to boost the visibility of each team would be included in that mandate. So if you're a fan of our content and want to participate in pushing competitive culture for the game in a positive direction, please join our Discord with the link below. The Discord is intended for anyone participating in the scene at any level and should serve as a nice backup tool in case of an emergency. For instance, if you wake up and find that your team has disintegrated overnight, you can rely on this kind of unbiased, not unregulated, but unbiased space, not affiliated with a particular team or a tournament host, to reach out for a new one. Camo Net Supremacy is a collective media project and community for the scene, and we won't ever host our own tournament as Camo Net Supremacy. Also, share this around to your guys if you're a team lead. This stuff isn't just about upper level team strategy and stuff. Some of your guys might go on to become tournament hosts or team leads in their own right, 2-3 years down the road. So this information can help kind of everyone move in a positive direction. If you've got a bunch of guys, just a little diatribe real quick. If the value in being a team leader, squad leader, whatever you want to call it for your organization in a competitive team context, the value in having a squad lead is, that guy checks the map all the time. That guy has his finger on the pulse of where we need to go and why we need to go there and why not over here and stuff like that. That's the guy that has kind of centralized map knowledge and all that stuff. So that way, the guys under him don't need to focus on that stuff. All they can just have fun and kind of, click mouses and pull triggers and stuff like that and just do what they do best. And it's easy when you're in sort of a leadership position like that and you're used to kind of diluting down information. It's really easy to kind of you'll watch something, but you just organically, the thought won't occur to kind of pass it down because you don't necessarily do that with other stuff, right? So just offering that this is kind of content for everyone. So please, if you could share it around, that would be absolutely fantastic. Especially since we can't reach out to kind of individual people anymore. We're planning to hold our first community debate about the game in a few weeks. I've been saying a few weeks for about a week now, so about one more week. We'll select from 3 or 4 different topics. 2 to 3 people will represent the pro side for those topics. 2 to 3 people will represent the con or the counter positions. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please reach out through Discord. Our content doesn't feature crazy overlays or editing on purpose, so aside from technical issues and bits on the front and back end of the recordings, We leave everything in the middle for transparency. All right, now getting into the podcast proper. Um, I don't have a good succinct umbrella topic to address with this one, kind of like I have in the past couple. If you haven't seen the past couple of episodes, I'd recommend going back to watch those first. But this episode will be addressing some of kind of the loose subjects and points that didn't fit well with those past entries. They're important to talk about, uh, poignant to talk about, I'd argue. No one's going to believe me, but I write the outlines for these episodes ideally days in advance. I think the last episode I came out with the outline, I waited like 4 or 5 hours, kind of chewed on it, made some changes, and then recorded. But I actually prefer kind of spending a little bit of time to clear my head. Usually I try to sleep in between, because I could just be in a fucked up mood, or I could be really passionate about something that, I wake up and I realize that doesn't matter at all. No one's going to believe that for this one. No one's going to believe that. But that's fine. I wrote 95% of this days ago. So, anyways, starting off with our first topic, I'd touched on kind of community standards and balancing as sort of like hey, well, everyone uses this, right? Like if someone came out with a weapons pack that, was well balanced and had a good plethora of weapons, right? Like you've got options for people that want to use the M4, you've got people that want to use that want to use like the Scar and the, I don't know, some fancy AR-15 alternative or something like that. But we all kind of agree as a community that, like, okay, well, the damage values and stuff for all that kind of needs to be in line. All the rifles kind of need to have the same output. You can't have one that's too overpowered. All the sniper rifles kind of need to be on par with each other and all that stuff. If the team, or if the, sorry, I have weird hair in my mouth. It's the cons of having a German Shepherd. Everyone should at some point, sooner rather than later, just as an example, rally around sort of like a shared mod pack, so that way we're all playing with the same expectations and all that good stuff. So I've touched on that before, but I wanted to dive a little bit specifically into this because I feel a bit of resistance, and I just want to kind of give my philosophical points to kind of help the conversation along, or at the very least to explain my side. So this all kind of comes down to time to kill. Time to kill is really important in a first-person shooter game like this, especially in a competitive context. It's a fine line to kind of ride. So definitionally speaking, time to kill isn't just, or shouldn't just be, an evaluation of kind of how long it takes to kill a singular person. It should also measure or take into account how long it should take to kill multiple people in succession, right? Time to kill, if it's just you and a guy in the desert and he's not even looking in your direction, time to kill doesn't really matter all that much. But time to kill if you're on an objective and it's 1 against 5 and you've got a one-hit kill 30-round weapon, you can just swack everyone before anyone knows what's happening, right? That should also be taken into account. If not, that's arguably like the more important thing to take into account. So there's a lot that feeds into both those kind of definitions. What's the magazine size? You could have a one-hit kill weapon that's only got 3 rounds in a semi-auto magazine, right? Does that balance out and all that good stuff? So addressing both aspects, really important. One feeds off the other. If you get the drop on someone, so this is kind of what I was talking about, there should be kind of a fine line. You've got kind of the duality of the situation. If you get the drop on someone, that should result in a kill that doesn't take a ton of effort, right? If you already had better positioning and the guy wasn't expecting you, he didn't swing a corner and knew that you were going to be there or whatever, you should get that kill. But at the same time, you're getting shot at should kind of afford you an opportunity to respond with skill and efficiency. I give the example all the time, I suppose not in this context or in this format with this game, but before the infantry combat overhaul update with squad, if guy A, if you set up in a tree line and you saw me running through a field in front of you, no cover at all, back before the ICO, the infantry combat overhaul, back before the ICO, if you started shooting at me and you didn't hit your first or second rounds, I could immediately spin because I'm just facing the sounds, right, of you shooting. There's no suppressors in that game. I can typically see you because the terrain, like bushes and trees and rocks and stuff like that, the density isn't really all that complex. So, like, when you look at a tree line, you can just see a guy. And the time to aim down sights was not even half a second, non existent, and I could drill you. That was my opportunity to respond with skill and efficiency, but it was like too much time, that balance was a little out of whack, just a little. The reality should have been, for that game in particular, a separate argument to make, but I'll make it. Yeah, if you're set up in that tree line and you miss me with like your first or second rounds, I should have an opportunity to like, all right, I got to take a knee because otherwise my weapon sway is going to be a little ridiculous, or maybe that's the only way that I can get my time to aim down sights down to what I need it to be, and then I shoot at you, but you've got an equal opportunity. This is why I'm not a fan of most aim punch in games, both visual and like, oh, he's shooting at me. All of a sudden, my arms are jelly. Like, no, I set up in that fucking tree line. Like, just let me. I missed my first couple of shots. Let me do my thing. I'm gonna get the guy. Hopefully that never gets ported over to the game. But people shouldn't feel like bullet sponges with 6 to 10 shot health pools. It shouldn't feel like the Division or like a looter shooter where you're just only using full auto because like at some point you'll kill the guy. But people also shouldn't die in milliseconds. And if you have something in the game that's like a one-hit kill, like a big bolt action sniper rifle, you kind of, that's kind of okay, but you really have to restrict and balance that, right? There's only one of those sniper rifles per team. If you've got 50 on 50, that's kind of okay. If you die to that, you're like, ah, fuck, but at least we know the snipers in this area. Really loud gunshots so everyone can hear where it came from. Maybe only tracer ammo for that sniper rifle so you can see kind of, you have an opportunity to respond. Maybe the reload animation, your guy like in an untrained manner. I know I'm losing some people, but maybe he like you hit R to chamber a new round and your guy like completely holds the weapon, kind of like you can inspect your weapon if you hold R, holds it out in his hands and like reaches down into a pocket, loads around into the chamber, brings the bolt forward, and then, comes back up. And that's like a 3-second reload or something. So you can't just like no scope people from 2 feet away and clear compounds. That would probably be okay. You would just have to balance it in other sort of ways. Not all weapons need to have the same damage output, but everything should kind of be equal with that time to kill in mind. So you can have a DMR that kills people in 2 shots, but the recoil is incredible. So you can really only pow, pow, not da 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 da. Solid sound effects from Bambi Sandy right there. Yep. Recoil and reset times. If you're looking through a scope, it should logically take longer for you to kind of get your sight picture back, or at the very least for you to get your scope back on target. I get that it might have like some semblance in realism, and I'm gonna spend probably the next 15 episodes fighting with people over the value of realism and fun and how those two are not the same, but it shouldn't be like Tarkov where you can full auto someone and perfectly remain, stay consistent through the scope. Yeah, really? No. Um, and then with, okay, so this is, sorry, I'm going to kind of list out subjects that kind of go under what the community should standardize for balancing, and then I'll go dive into those subjects. So, new subject: forced role diversity through squad and team structure limitations. Like I just touched on, that one hit kill kind of overpowered fucking really big issue of a sniper rifle kind of only makes if there's one of them per team. Well, like in the game, both public and private, you won't find probably a single server that's running any sort of restriction like that on what role you can play. Even with something like escalation, I'm a big fan of a lot of what that mod kind of works in and tries to address, but you could still have a 6-man squad where everyone's rocking a saw or playing a sniper role, you know? That's not kind of how that should be. And I've gone specifically deep on this section of what role diversity should kind of look like, so I won't go super deep into it. But requiring separate roles and a commitment to those roles is really great for the culture. And if I'm the one of the 4 guys on my team that's in an anti-tank role, I take that role way seriously. And all of my kind of downstream, whether I sign up for a practice or not, whether I'm, an advocate for this change or that change, my total buy-in is just higher than it would be otherwise. It has great effects on teams and the quality of, like, if you're someone that's watching a casted match or a recording, results in like more fun to watch, more stuff to dig into. You can see like, oh shit, he hit that really long shot. Well, that really only matters if there's one guy in that area. If all 5 team members in that area have an RPG, then it doesn't fucking matter. So my kind of envisionment for that is like one meaningful role per squad, right? One AT role per squad, one marksman role. Marksman is different from sniper, right? The marksman is just a fucking guy with like a good scope and an ordinary rifle, right? Like your LPVOs. One rifleman per squad. I also hold the very unpopular opinion, that ordinary, outside of a literal auto rifleman designation, none of the weapons should have full auto capabilities in any way, shape, or form. Now, suddenly, that auto rifleman is important to have in the right place at the right time. I also don't think the auto, like the saw, that shouldn't get a 200 round belt. It should get maybe a 100 round belt. And the RPK, if that's the Soviet option, or the CSAT option, whatever you want to call that ulterior faction, to run in parity with like NATO or Blue 4 or whatever the fuck, the RPK should have a 75 round drum. What are we doing? Get real. Next kind of subsection topic. God, this might actually kind of be a short podcast. Ticket values and then value therein. Currently, with ARTL as an example, it's only about map play and map control. And even then, it's only about map play and map control at certain times, right? You can hold the middle objective or the majority of the objectives for 99.9% of the game, unless I have something, I'm misunderstanding something. My understanding is that whoever wins is just who controls the most objectives at the end of the match, at the end of the 2-hour period. So your people could start off strong and crush another team, but everyone kind of gets tired and bored, and you're like, oh, what the fuck are we doing? The other team does like a big push with 15 minutes left, and then they win the game. What value does that give anything that you've done up until that point? And then if you're only valuing map play and control, what value do you have as an individual to begin with, right? What's the value of having a guy with this rifle or this role here or 5 people versus 4 people? Like, hey, we really crushed like every counteroffensive that they did in between, hour 10 or, 10 minutes in to like an hour and 50 minutes in. You're kind of disenfranchising a lot of the game that we say is important, that we say is valuable. Um, if the only measure for success in competitive as a whole, I'm kind of making the assumption or the insinuation that like this, ARCL's stance on like how they measure a win is sort of going to kind of blanket affect competitive. Um, you making a play, any play, that doesn't immediately contribute to like a body on a point is valueless. Anything. I'll give lots of examples here. Infantry fighting in regions that support an objective, for instance, flanks and forward spaces that don't mean anything for instance, map play 3 objectives away. Think of like season 1, Gogland. The middle objective was in a big bowl. How much of the fighting happened like in and around the cliffs and not actually on the objective? And by on the objective, I mean on the flag, part of that math equation where, hey, I've got 4 guys, they've got 1, we're taking the base. None of that fighting on the outskirts mattered. For the same reason that you could have any team could have snuck people on the north side. There was a little bit of a dip and some suitable terrain for it next to that pond. You could just sneak a bunch of guys onto the objective, even though the enemy team's got 7 people on the cliffs with sniper rifles. And just as long as you don't get sniped, you took the objective. What are those people on the cliffs really doing at that point? Nothing, because you said that the only thing that matters is just taking objectives or not losing objectives. That's 95% of the fighting that you do. Sabotage roles, also as an example, in back lines don't mean anything for map play as well that's 3 objectives away, right? If you send someone to be a saboteur in someone's back lines, blowing up a logistics truck just means that that driver is going to respawn and pick a different route. Usually to supply a base that won't be fought on anytime soon, right? Really. Even if you kill that Logi driver 3-4 times, the truck doesn't mean anything. Killing the guy doesn't mean anything. Yeah, technically, I guess you lost the supplies, but like, were people really going to spawn on that base anyways? Like panic spawn? Probably not. Do the loadouts cost any supply? Probably not that much to be like, oh shit, we can't spawn here because we don't have any supplies. If objectives and actions are given ticket values, though, right? I know I don't shut the fuck up about what squad does, but squad got a lot right. If you give everything a ticket value, then everything is inherently worth something. And then you can kind of fine tune what that worth is and what that value is from there. If logistics trucks are worth 30 tickets, then there's suddenly something that needs protecting, like serious protection. You might change as a strategy how you handle going. Do you even risk supplying that base now? Like, we're not really down to it like that. If just as kind of a big example for this, in case people kind of don't feel what I'm saying, blowing up a logistics truck, if it's worth 30 tickets over here, means that infantry fighting over here has to adjust. Because now they're working with something. Sorry, my bad. Now you're working with like 20 tickets remaining as opposed to 50. If it's the last 10 minutes of the game and it's that close of a game, that really matters. That's really consequential. You feel that regardless of where you are on the map, right? Holding corners, play more conservatively. Hey, we gotta God, maybe we've got 15 tickets left. So if we don't lose any vehicles from this point on, we've got 15 lives. Do we consolidate everyone on the base? Do we shift people off of the objective and kind of let them move in? So then it's more like shooting fish in a barrel. You get cool opportunities and trade-offs and stuff like that, and the game's way more engaging that way. And like I said, everyone has value in that instance. If objects and sorry, my bad. God, my fucking notes are rough. The value of an objective in a framework kind of like this is similar to squad as well. Capturing an objective offers the capturing team like an additional number of tickets, and then losing an objective is in a negative, but it could actually offer an opportunity for additional tickets if you capture it back, right? So if you've got an hour left in a match and you're against a team that's evenly kind of pitted against yours, but you're down to like maybe your last 40 tickets, but you're like, I don't even know what the other team has left ticket wise. Let's pull back, actually let them capture this objective, and then we're just gonna kind of maybe they leave to go take the next one, or they get cocky and lazy and complacent. You can wipe them off the objective, and now you can take it back, and you got the same kind of additional tickets that they got. But that might be enough to sustain, 2 or 3 big pushes, and then you might win the match because you kind of had an opportunity, or you made a strategic decision to extend the game. I could probably go deeper into that, but we're going to take this episode by episode, at least for that subject, because I'm sure I'm going to really have to convince people. Community shared maps is a really big thing as well that the community needs to standardize. The game desperately needs small and kind of micro-sized maps that promote competitive play. These are purpose-built, genuine maps. They're not slices of Everon or anything like that. These maps can't be owned by any one group, or at the very least, you have to find someone to publish the maps that just doesn't care about petty shit. The point is to move the community and the game in a positive direction, not to own or exercise power over sections of the community. And then I think if there's kind of a good, seen it a lot in the last week, which is just interesting because it's not a dynamic in squad for better or worse. You can't really make your own mods and squad like you can with Reforger. The opportunities, you got to be a real deal coder, from my understanding, if you want to add something completely different or circumvent something ordinary with the game. But it's kind of the point of Reforger, right, is sort of its accessibility. I don't know why I said that wrong. So anyways, with the maps as well, my kind of last note on that is you should take care to avoid lighting disparities and kind of looks pretty aesthetics. I've complained in a couple of different places about how bad the lighting is if you're under a tree line or you're in a window or something like that. We gotta find a way to fucking fix that. So maybe a map that doesn't or a series of maps that really doesn't have any technical buildings. It's just kind of got open space. You could decorate a city with non-honorable buildings or something like that, so that way you have the aesthetic of playing through a building, but you don't have the balancing issues that come with that guy was pitch black and it was literally impossible to see him and he killed me. All right, so here's the real section. And again, I wrote this days ago, so sure no one's going to believe me. Public culture, not private products. And again, this just kind of made sense in Squad because there was really no opportunity for it to feel weird in Squad. Squad really didn't have mods. There were like admin and casting tools, but there was no adding in outside weapons or even maps really or systems. The gunplay pre-ICO, the gunplay and everything was perfect. There was never a conversation. Never. Ever, ever. Obviously, I wasn't in every single tournament meeting or team meeting or whatever the fuck, but like, there was never a conversation about like, hey, we should add in more bolt action sniper rifles. That just went. So there was no opportunity to like treat things as private products. The difference between this server's, or this community or this team that ran their own public server and this server community that ran their own public server was just like their rules enforcement and what map rotation they played. I fucking wish it was like that for Reforger. Reforger's so petty looking so far. But anyways, yep. Nobody owns this process. Nobody. And you see that competitive is in every game. There's competitive Rocket League. There's competitive in Squad, competitive in Hell Let Loose, competitive in this game. Competitive doesn't refer to like an agreement. Competitive play is just the junction between wanting more from a game and having the willingness to do something about that in a player versus player context. Hey, my team versus your team, my 10 guys versus your 10 guys this Saturday. Decent event on this map, maybe. Rules, balancing, and maps, like what's played on and kind of how we're going to handle that. That's just filters to run that desire through. But regardless of like the agreed upon rules or balancing or maps, it's just a play style. It's a process. It's a hobby to a degree. Nobody owns fucking carpentry. From servers to teams, tournament hosts to mod development, it's really easy to see these things. Just kind of a disclaimer, just to interject real quick. All this stuff might be logical and kind of known to some people, but this is to kind of bring this to the forefront to like the average Joe. So if I go really deep into something or my wording is kind of mediocre, that's why. So it's easy to see these things as exclusive businesses or products. Things are typically driven by an individual and then supported by a team. I want to start a competitive team. I got a couple of guys, that kind of agree with my vision, and we're going to build this thing. That typically comes with some kind of human nature-based negative bits that can get pretty oppressive if it's not kind of checked, if you don't account for it, if you're not honest about it. The difference between servicing a wider culture versus your culture is very quick to identify. In my opinion, though, there's not actually anything wrong with building and maintaining a private experience. But communication and honesty is usually the issue with that 99% of the time. Claiming to care about the competitive community in Squad, for instance, while banning any team that participates in a rival tournament, ask me how I know, stating that your team is all about positive influence, but you refuse to interact with the lower tier teams. You won't scrimmage certain people just because they're beneath you, right? Like, no, you really, really care about the culture, don't you? Yeah, it's crazy. Be open and communicate your intentions just as early as possible, right? We're all kind of new at this thing. You're gonna make mistakes. So like, if you're not really feeling 100% firm on a rule or like the basis for a balancing decision, just communicate that. Just say like, hey, yeah, every time we think about it, like we can't see the upside of this, but someone could make an argument someday that could change our minds. If you haven't developed a stance on a subject, you communicate that in open channels. Be honest about it. Backdoor discussions and kind of last minute changes will never be seen as a positive in basically like any context, even if the change is positive. Um, People make important decisions about their time, the value, and participation based on what's presented to them at the time. So there could be, if you say, no, I can't give that example. That's too on the nose. Um, a team might not sign up for ARCL Season 2 if they decide, like, it's going to start kind of in the fall. My kids are going to start school right around that time. I kind of need to be able to focus on other stuff. But if you were upfront about Season 2 offering prize money, you might change your calculus there, right? Sorry. Yeah, stating that these three things will never change, and then changing one of those three things, again, even if it's for the better, it communicates just automatically like a lack of honesty or critical thinking, especially if that's like a structural change. Like, hey, we've got 7 listed rules for this tournament. We're gonna change 5 of them halfway through the tournament. Did you fucking think about the rules before you started the tournament? Like, what? Likewise, if you can't articulate kind of why a change or a balancing decision is being considered or made, then you're already on thin ice with trust. Even before you go through to make the change. If ARCL goes through and says, hey, the tournament starts in about a week, we're thinking about turning it into a pistols only bracket. We're thinking about that. No one's going to respond positively to that, even if it's a cool idea. This is just a separate point. If you don't believe in diverse opinions, constructive criticism, or what the average person would probably just call honesty, don't tell people that you do, and then that won't be a problem. If you never claim to be like an open and considerate space, then when you're not open or considerate, it's not necessarily a negative. Not a good, but for everything that I've mentioned so far, there are quite a few reasons for why kind of none of this comes as standard. I'd be willing to bet that there's maybe 5 other people that have come from the squad competitive community into Reforger to do competitive. I'd be willing to bet that maybe 3 of those people were just ordinary Joes, just like on teams. They weren't in a leadership position, which isn't to say that people that are in leadership positions are in any way, shape, or form better people. Just got to stay consistent on that point. But they'd never hosted up or set up scrimmages or like been part of tournament balancing or anything like that. So in its own right, Reforger is its own organic community. Maybe a little bit of what's kind of been decided on was influenced by like watching a recording of another game or something like that, but there's a reason why a lot of the parallels from Squad and sort of the stuff that happened in that community are happening here, and it's all just a lot of like human nature and stuff. So first of all, got lots of pings. First of all, projects are typically driven as a response to something, and for better or worse, they're rarely driven by genuine ingenuity. Tournament hosts will base their desire, balancing, and tone off of what a previous host didn't do well in their eyes. Weapon assets are brought into the game to address a lack of diversity or a time period mismatch, right? That's like the heart of the WCS and RHS weapons. It's like, hey, there's a bunch of fucking like modern day M4s and rocket launchers and stuff. Servers will spin up to tweak 2 or 3 things that other servers aren't doing well, and you'll typically find that the server's not really offering a meaningfully different experience at the same time. That's just kind of a I don't know where that comes from, but that's normal. Number 2, there's typically no incentive to share knowledge, experiences, or drive. If you're a top tier team, why would you give away the secrets to your success? If you've got a successful set of servers, why would you coach someone through starting their own? If you're in the leadership class for your team, why would you present anyone an opportunity to do your job as well as you? That just means that you'd get replaced, right? Or there'd be, instead of having 3 squad leads and your job is really important, you've got 7 and you're only squad leading 2 people, right? That's less satisfaction for you, right? You see this is an informal point, but you see this really, really easily in milsim explicit groups like roleplay, PvE, squad structure, when you enter my TeamSpeak channel, say yes or no sir sort of groups. And it carries down through everything, even PvP. Point number 3, player count numbers and participation metrics are believed to be king. If you believe in something hard enough, it probably won't happen, right? If 95% of the organizations in a genre like competitive believe in something, it's probably gonna happen, all right? If player and participation metrics are the only recognized currency outside of like a win or a loss in a match, you create an inherent breeding ground for toxicity and childish behavior practices for the same reason that I've touched on before. As a team, if you only value skill, you're gonna get a bunch of people that got kicked out of their communities for being toxic, but they're good at the game because all you care about is skill. So here's a banger of an example, right? Server A and Server B run by 2 different groups, and they offer the same mods. Server A's developers made the mods. Server A caters to a larger spread of players with a map that's large and open to appeal to armor, helicopter, and infantry players alike. Server B caters to only infantry players by running a small urban map and removing all helicopters and armor. Server B says that they offer a better experience for infantry than Server A's often roughly balanced experience. Server A removed Server B's ability to use their mods. In this example, because all that matters is player metrics, Server A didn't care about Server B's scope, the audience, or probably even region. They saw an opportunity to keep some of their infantry players on their server. Culture didn't matter. Actual poaching versus potential poaching didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was their product and kind of the safety of their product. Point number 4. If player metrics are king, then everything's a threat. Servers compete with every other server. Mods compete with other mods. Tournament hosts compete with other tournament hosts. If the line between conceptual, meaning not real, but it could happen, or a potential conflict, and an actual conflict doesn't exist. Tournament hosts don't work together. It's the same way in squad. Servers don't advertise for other servers that could cater to a different experience. Teams don't organically work with other teams. There's a point to make that teams will, murk for other teams. They'll, Team A will reach out to Team B and they'll say hey, we're short 5 people for this scrimmage. Do you mind throwing a couple of people over? But even in those examples, you'll never see real cooperation even inside those matches. Those 5 guys, those 6 guys that you kind of like filled in from another team, I've never seen a match. Never seen a match. To include, well, I guess I don't know enough to know who was a merc and who was organically part of the teams in season 1 for ARCL, but like in all of my time in squad, literally never happened. You just end up with these guys that like go off and do their own fucking thing. Yeah, this can feel really perverse if the literal experience for 2 projects is completely different. I've got great examples from this from Squad. I know everyone's really here for my story times. The best example I can give comes from a few specific experiences. So, tournament host A operates a bracket twice a year. They have rules in place to avoid excessively high ping disparities. This means that teams who aren't in the typical regions, with North America and Europe, or people that don't have good internet, are often incapable of participating in the tournament completely, if not for a portion of the matches, right? The Oceania people, or the people that are in Australia or China, basically just don't get to play if they're matched up with people in North America. They're like, all right, well, we either got to find another team for you to play in, or you just got to eat that loss, or we'll call it a victory for both teams or something because it's technical. Tournament host B spins up to address that disparity and announces that their constituency, or their target group for the tournament, is explicitly the people who have those ping issues. Okay, so this tournament is only gonna, if tournament A services like 30 teams, this tournament is only going to service like 6. Okay, the tournament announces dates that occur in tournament A's off season. The response is tournament A bans every single person involved with tournament B, to include a majority of the teams that are electing to participate in tournament B, both from the Discord and actually participating in the bracket. Right. Another similar example. There was a Star Wars squad for mod. Sorry. It's just funny to think about sometimes. There was a Star Wars squad, or Star Wars mod for squad. They replaced like player models and weapons, and a lot of the maps were themed from Star Wars, so like you would play as droids or clones or whatever. A group of people from various teams came together to announce that there'd be like a meme style kind of tournament. Like I keep making the reference to like a pistols only bracket, like not serious really, with Star Wars, that mod as the basis on some of those maps. And that'd occur between like all of the other tournaments that year. Everyone involved with that announcement from a staffing perspective, right, that agreed to be like a caster or a game master, that's not a term that's in squad, but like, a ref or whatever, people that like put together the thing, and we're talking to the mod makers and all that shit, were banned from participating. And I think like 2 of the 5, I think there were only like 4 or 5 tournaments that were going on at that time, like that year. That number kind of fluctuates, or fluctuated over time, but their teams were allowed to play without those individual people in those tournaments, but those specific people weren't allowed to play. If that sounds weird, it's because it is. It's because it is weird and petty, And then my last point to make, this is going to be a short episode. Nice. The competitive community needs to kind of understand common motivations, tendencies, and factors, right? We're talking about like just kind of human nature stuff that like, unless you go out of your way to really account for it, or you see it in another scene, or you experience it, it's just going to kind of keep popping up. And there's nothing inherently wrong or evil, like I said earlier, about like having a private experience or a private product. I made these mods explicitly for my server, and I don't want anyone else to use them. Well, there's no issue with that if you communicate that from day one. But like, if you make a bunch of mods, you run them on your server for 6 months, and then 4 or 5 other servers say like, oh, hey, those are cool mods, cool maps. Can we use those? And you go, yeah. And then you revoke the access because someone said that they didn't like your opinion on the game or something like that. That's where the issue is. It's kind of the dishonesty and like the pettiness aspect. If we're gonna make this thing last, the competitive scene, we need to step away from the idea of ownership. You don't own something. You use the thing that you made to service the community. Servicing the community is where the mentality should be. Because like I said earlier, competitive play is it's a process. With or without you or your limitations, it's still going to exist. You can either do that well or you're shit at it. Like, there's kind of no middle ground. It's about enjoying the process, not just winning. I spoke to that a couple of episodes ago. Like, as a team, if you enter ARCL Season 2, or enter in for ARCL Season 2, what's the goal for your team? If you've got 20 people that are riding on you and committing to like, hey, yep, all these match times on these weekends, I'm going to show up for them. I'm going to take time out of my day to... I fucking brain farted right there, but to commit to playing in this experience and doing these things and performing, giving a fuck and trying. Do you only care about winning? Because then why keep playing if you lose 2 matches? And you've got 3 remaining. You're not going to win the tournament. It has to be about the fun of like playing against other teams and getting better as a process, right? Not just kind of the surface level, we just want to win. Because you're not going to win every match. Challenge, satisfaction. Top teams should be involved in helping lower tier teams grow and get better, so that there's more available challenge, you would think, right? If everything's broken into brackets, right? There's top tier, mid tier, low tier. Low tier is kind of where everyone kind of starts out before they get properly evaluated by like a series of tournament hosts. Everyone in the scene kind of agrees that like this team isn't as good as the second best team in the game, right? So you inherently need to separate based on skill, so that way it's fun for people in each skill level to participate in a tournament. Unpopular opinion, apparently. So like, if the gulf between the top 3 teams and the next 7 teams is insurmountable. The top 3 teams, they're doing stuff like they spent 3 hours. They know they're fighting over this set of objectives. They went through last week and spent 3 hours looking for like the meta bush to sit in, where you like can't even see that guy, or like the window where the lighting's fucked, or how fast can I spam the lean button and spray with full auto to kill that guy, and then all he sees on his end, because like his network hasn't caught up, is just that he died, right? If the gulf between those top 3 teams and the next 7 teams are just... Shouldn't the top 3 teams like want more people to play against, more diversity, or do they really just want to play against like the same 2 other teams the whole time? That's fucking stupid. That's how it kind of works for Squad. I don't understand it. But Squad isn't about the process. It's about just winning. And then if you only care about winning, you can't account for anything else. What if half your team leaves? They burn out on the game. Well, now you're definitely not going to win matches. What's the point of the other half of the people sticking around, right? But if it's about the process, you just replace those people. And now you have like a cool opportunity to go like, all right, now we're kind of back down at the bottom skill level, and we're going to train up all these people because I've got a bunch of vets that like can articulate, why we need to do something really well. And so it's kind of all I've got for this episode. Not like a huge breadth of topics, but arguably like the most important content that I've kind of spoke to so far. Just again, in closing, please, not begging people, but please join the Discord, because that is the only way that we're going to be able to substantiate seemingly any of our content so far. So please help us out in that regard. Anyways, peace.